Hey, this is Troy Taylor with the Championship Football Coaches Clinic. I'm pumped up today because we got Coach McNally and we got Coach Scott Peters. Coach McNally said that Scott Peters is the #1 pass protection coach in the world. Scott, for those that do not know who you are, can you tell us a little bit about who Scott Peters is and where you're from and a little bit about your journey?
Well, that's a crazy compliment, Coach. I don't know if that's justified at all, but I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm a coach for the Browns. I'm assistant line coach there. I'm a coach with Bill Callahan, and I played college football at Arizona State and had a 7-year career in the NFL that was kind of marred by injuries. I had a lot of injuries. One of the coaches I played for, the best coach I've ever played for, was Coach McNally, and I got fortunate enough to play for Coach with the Giants, and so we reconnected. Since I retired from football, I started an MMA business called Fight Ready in Scottsdale, and I did that for a number of years, and I got involved in all the various martial arts that kind of comprise MMA. Began competing in grappling, submission wrestling, and trained with a lot of the top MMA, like UFC fighters. I go and work their training camps and just training partners for them, and then I coach guys and corner them, and then I kind of figured, I really wanted to get back into football because I started finding these patterns of movement and mechanics that were kind of really efficient and, could generate more power, the way these guys fight and also the way that they train. And I thought it was interesting. So I kind of started improvising some techniques and some drills and things that I saw in fighting. And then I got linked back up with Coach McNally through Bob Wiley at the Cool Clinic. And that was in, I want to say 2014, I think, or maybe 2013. And then did the clinic there, and we Coach and I got back in touch. And we just, all we talked about all the time about, just the various techniques and just things that we can do to improve the game. And he introduced me to Coach Callahan. I actually sold my gym in 2013, and I started another company called Safe Football because we had some good results with trying to eliminate head impacts on the line. So we did that I did that up at the University of Washington, and their results were really good. I thought, hey, with all the concussion issues that are out there and the concerns that around that, we can play the game with a very dominant style, very aggressive and physical style, without necessarily using your head to bash somebody with, because obviously there's repercussions and concerns there from a health standpoint. So what I did was I built a curriculum, started training high schools, did some NFL work and college work, and Coach McNally introduced me to Bill Callahan, who Coach McNally is my original mentor, and also he's Bill Callahan's mentor. So, I know Coach McNally, he had sent Bill, said, hey, go out and see Scott in Arizona. So Bill came out, and, we got together at my gym at Fight Ready and just kind of started sharing stuff. And he really, I think he enjoyed it and appreciated it, and implemented a lot of that with the Cowboys when he was there. And so then we stayed in touch, and he got with the Redskins then. So he brought me out to the Redskins. Coach McNally would continually bring me out to the Cool Clinic, and, I just did more clinics, and then kind of evolved the company, which was called Safe Football at that time. And I said, people are actually not as interested in safety as they are performance, and safety is a byproduct of better performing players. But if you use these methods, so we started calling it tip of the spear, and that's the name of my company. And we've really made a mission to go out and elevate, the game and the tech from the technical standpoint when it comes to contact and using your hands and, using the best mechanics of your body to try to generate optimal force and get the best results on the player. So kind of put that together, built a video library. We do a ton of clinics, and Coach Callahan got an opportunity to go to the Browns, and he asked me if I wanted to go, and I said yes. So I joined him in 2020. So this is my 4th year as a coach, and I owe it to Coach McNally that I'm in the National Football League as a coach.
Man, that is awesome. And let me ask you, Scott, when was it that you caught wind or heard that Jim McNally was on Twitter?
Oh, it didn't take long, because we have guys on our staff, some younger guys that are constantly looking at Twitter. They're like, "Can you believe this?" I go, and I was laughing because I saw some great videos of Coach giving unbelievable information from his toilet. So that's perfect. That's Coach. He's out on Twitter. I was so happy to see it because it's a great platform for him to share his stuff, because he's living, breathing, eating, sleeping, peeing football all the time. So, and his information is like so invaluable. And he's got people that across many generations of coaches and players that he's mentored, whether he knows it or not.
Yeah. So the one thing I hang my hat on is I told Coach McNally the first day that I met him, it took 1 hour for me to change 2 pictures on his Twitter and change his name from Jim McNally 573942 to Coach McNally OL. Anybody can coach Anthony Munoz, but to get Jim McNally on Twitter and teach him Twitter is the greatest coaching job I've done in 24 years. Coach McNally, you're not allowed to talk, but I'm going to let you talk now, Coach. How do you feel about being on Twitter and being on a podcast with Scott Peters?
I feel it's an honor. I mean, whether Scott knows it or not, he's one of my mentors. He's very humble, so he'll deny most times that you say something nice about him. But there's 2 guys that mentored me that were younger than me. One is Strollo, who, if you had John use littler words, you'd understand him. All right. But I learned to understand him. And then obviously Scott, who is an expert at martial arts, but he knows how to apply it in football. So he knows that you can't do every single martial art move, but he's cut it down to, 5, 6, 7 deals. And he's one of my mentors. So that's why I want it to be his podcast. And you ask him questions and I'm podcast out. So just,
yes, sir.
Let's let him do his deal.
Yeah. So Scott, when was the first time that you remember hearing the name Jim McNally, or the first day you met him when the Giants signed you? Did you know of him before then?
Oh, of course. Well, I met Coach at the Combine when I was coming out, and I remember going, "Wow, that guy's funny." I loved him. I just enjoyed talking to him at the Combine, but obviously I knew about him before that because of his success in the NFL and his resume with coaching Munoz and all the other guys that he coached. So I was very familiar. But then when I had the chance to go to New York, because at the time I became a free agent, I got injured, and I had a couple other teams, but I thought there's only one coach I want to play for. I was excited, so I took advantage of that opportunity and got a chance to play for Coach, which was unbelievable.
Man, Coach McNally, do you remember that when y'all signed Scott?
I do. It was he came in on about a Monday or Tuesday, and he actually played in the next game. He'll probably remember what the first game was. I don't remember what it was, but he played immediately. I think we were kind of mid-season, and he played every single game. He started at left guard, and he just got in there and played. He learned the plays. I mean, and he played good. We didn't have a great year. We had a lot of guys injured, obviously, and Scott was injured himself the most of that year, but he played on a bad ankle. But we had a lot of other guys that were hurt, and I think our quarterback got hurt, and so it was just an average year. But I think it was fun for Scott because he got a chance to play.
Yes. So Scott, what do you remember about that experience?
I just remember going in and learning and being blown away by the information that Coach gave, because as a player, there's definitely frustrations that I had when you get a guy that goes, "Come on, you're yelling at you got to block the guy." And, okay, well, no kidding. I mean, any coach can point out a flaw, but who can help you correct the flaw? Who can give you specific information when it comes to technique? Strength was never a concern for me. I was always very strong. I was quick. I had whatever I needed, physically to play. So there wasn't an issue there. I didn't have a problem learning plays. There's times if you got beat, there was a technical issue that I maybe wasn't aware of. And so when a coach could tell you what your issue was, it's one thing, but a coach that can actually correct the issue and teach you how to play and perform and with all the various looks that you're going to get in the NFL, that was something that took me back. And it was really, it actually set me up for failure going forward, because like I didn't have to get a coach like that again, and no disrespect to the coaches I had, who were, I always had some very good coaches, but I think like, there's one thing to know the scheme, and I think everybody talks about that, and there's very much a value in scheme, of course, but the thing that's kind of missing in my mind, and that's what kind of prompted my decision to start Tip of the Spear, was that I think the one area that's lacking, a lot of coaches are looking at scheme evolution, but at the end of the day, I think I hear this said a lot. Hey, all the plays have been run. There are new plays. So they're like, really? I mean, no, that doesn't mean that the people run them at the right plays at the right time. But from that standpoint, there's a lot of knowledge out there that exists, but there's very limited knowledge on technique. And Coach McNally was someone who had both of those aspects in his coaching style, where he had the information from the scheme, he could teach that, but then it was like, here's this technical side, which was not only refreshing, but like I said, it may have set people up for failure that got to go to another place where, they didn't have that specificity to their instruction, because I think, then you find coaches will just tell you to get bigger or something, or, go lift weights or go eat something, that's, to me, that's not coaching. So, I felt like there's an area of growth in the game, and that is definitely on the technical side. So, because, both schemes are sound. If you got a sound scheme and you're doing well there, the one area that is really limited is, as far as if you want to grow your team, grow your player, it's technique. And I think, you get, especially on the line, guys that come like me, that I was a big kid growing up, I walk out there in high school and I charge forward and the guy just splatters. He goes flying. And then they go, hey, you're really good. You're a good player. I'm like, I don't know what I did. I just flicked that guy and he went flying. And you get to, then you get to college. And then I had similar luck there. I was able to do the same thing because I was strong and I played hard. But I certainly wasn't optimal. I didn't have really much of an idea what I was doing. And then you got to the NFL and tried the same approach. And hey, oh shoot, I got beat here because a subtle change in your footwork or your set or your hand placement, all these things matter, But I wasn't like equipped at that time to know where I could diagnose, because you got a lot going on and you're not sure, you don't have the exposure. I think so. The way most players learned in my, from my history and my experience, is that they learn through on-the-job training and they adapt. So if you get a chance to play and you do well enough, well, you'll learn something, because if you can learn, you can adapt, you can grow. But is there a better way to do it? And I think finding a coach who can take you on a straight line instead of a zigzag pathway, which is what I think most players did, they figured out how not to get beat by getting beat. So if you can kind of tell someone, hey, don't put your hand on the stove, well, maybe, you watch someone else burn it, maybe you can learn something. But in the end, if a coach can kind of show you those things, teaching you how to apply the best positions, be in the best position to have both positional leverage and physical leverage, to win, you got something there. Because I think everybody at the NFL level has some physical talent, and they're all there for a reason. So what makes one guy ascend to a higher level than another? And it's not always physical.
Yeah, and just from meeting Coach McNally, I'm amazed at how little picture he is. I mean, he's not a big picture guy. He's a very little picture guy. And, his clips that he would record of just like a backside guard with a 3 technique. I mean, it's so little of a picture, and you're right. It's all about technique. So like for the high school coaches that are watching in the Tip of the Spear, I mean, the winningest program in Virginia, Highland Springs High School, has won 5 state championships out of 7 years. They beat us in the regional championship. They are members of y'all's program, the Tip of the Spear. I saw Coach Lauren Johnson, who played at Virginia Tech. He's from Miramar, and we're in Richmond, and his school is near the airport. What are the basic fundamental beliefs of the Tip of the Spear?
You're going to have to bring us in to find out. No, I'm kidding. We teach, honestly, our top level. Here's our thing that we look at. The body works a certain way. Everybody is football. The contact is not like something you just haven't know intuitively. There's guys that do it at a high level. And to your point before, when you said, coach looks at with the small lens, he's looking like almost like through a microscope. And so when you're looking at film as a coach, you got to be able to look at the macro, but the best coaches look at the micro. you're looking through a microscope because you understand the scheme. Okay. But now how do we make this guy better in these individual blocks? Because, so it was about skill development was the answer. It's about having the best techniques, obviously for every application, having a system and a teaching style and a way that you can develop those and train those. And at the high school level, every coach is limited by time. Everybody's going to complain that they don't have enough time. That goes at every level. It's something consistent with youth to NFL. And so then how do you use your time optimally? How do you get players to learn contact skills that are, again, they're counterintuitive. It's crashing into someone at full speed is not, something people are, born to do. It's like you have to learn how to use the mechanics, how to attack people in ways that put you at the greatest strength and then put them in the greatest weakness. So you can compromise their anatomical integrity while you're optimal with yours. So putting people in the best positions to strike is not just blindly going out and smashing them. It's a martial art. And that's how I look at football. I look at offensive line play in particular. It's a martial art. And I think, when you see the mechanics and you can see the guys improve and you have a good system, you have a really well thought out system and you have a great training model under that with skill development, you can accomplish a lot. And especially at the high school level where, there's such a variance in size and athletic ability across schools. So you'll see teams that we've helped that, usually the team that comes to us, they say, hey, we have smaller guys. We're playing against really good players. In order for us to compete, we have to be great. So they're usually the kind of groups that bring us in. But if you get guys that have a lot of talent to begin with, well, now they have an exceptional edge. If you can get those guys rolling and you can teach them the mechanics and the drills that kind of support what we're doing. We're just trying to provide optimal techniques, and not just that, how do they apply? But then the biggest piece, in my view, once you understand that, because a lot of people now know there's some good information out there. There's guys that talk about it, like Coach McNally. But the key that the reason why not everybody's effective at it is because they're not properly employing a skill development program that supports it. So that's what Tip of the Spear does. We put together, they're shortcuts in a lot of ways. It's teaching people. There's a lot of information, like I said, like a lot of coaches will say, I'll hear the coaches in the NFL say, hey, there's no new plays. Everybody knows what, there hasn't been a ton of innovation in that realm. Well, there has been, but we're at a point now where you're seeing old plays come back. And maybe that's even true for techniques. Maybe there's guys that have been doing these techniques for a long time, but who's ever put it into a system where you can teach someone and replicate that model, where you can get those players to function at that level and to reproduce those techniques consistently. And so it's spelling it out for people and putting a good model in place that they can understand. And it's a progressive model. It's like a belt system, if you will, in fighting, because, you start out a white belt. So, okay, well, we're going to put the teaching progression in accordance with that. We're going to teach you the more advanced techniques as you go. So, initially it's just basic general contact. Then we have, you go from hand contact and shoulder contact. That's the two types of contact we teach at the lowest levels. And so shoulder contact would involve offensive linemen on a pull when, you have a high-speed collision, defensive players on a tackle, lead blockers, guys like that. Anytime there's a higher speed collision, you involve your shoulders. So there's a certain mechanic that's universal, no matter if you're tackling or blocking someone, that is just optimal. So we have a base model for that, and we teach people those mechanics, and then obviously there's situational adjustments. And then we talk about the hands. So that's also true. Every player in the field probably, except for players that are like quarterbacks, and kickers probably use their hands to, maybe even quarterbacks use a stiff arm. So the point is like your hands are a great tool if you can play long. And so some of the mechanics that we teach are kind of universal. And then at a base level, so you can teach these mechanics to players, how to root your feet, how to ground your body, how to transfer force, from force deflection with ascending the hips, bringing all your power through the ground, using optimal mechanics, and then having a frame that can sustain that, can support that power, and the arms have to extend in a certain way. And I think a lot of players you're seeing out there, and just one real quick example is they're playing with their thumbs in, and coach will say thumbs up. Okay, well, that's great, but just because my thumbs up doesn't mean my elbows are in. So all that force gets transferred out the elbow, and anything you put together from the ground up is really rendered ineffective, or it's really less than optimal, because all that force gets transferred out to the body. So if you learn how the subtle mechanics work of the body, you can transfer more force. That's why some players that may not bench that much may have effectively be more powerful on the field than a guy that is the best lifter on the team. And so, and you see that all through even youth football. For some kids hit harder than others, you know? Well, little kids can hit really hard, and some kids are big and they're not hitting hard. Well, and coaches can't figure it out. Well, they're putting something together through the kinetic chain, you know, on impact. Some kids actually don't, they just kind of go soft and limp on impact, whereas others, everything fires at the right time when impact occurs. And that's like showing someone fire for the first time when they, you know, they can learn that. And I think it shows how those players can improve by just doing subtle drills and making that a part of your program, because skill development in football is actually really far behind other sports. You know, like if you look at baseball, those guys are always taking batting practice in the off season. Well, when you practice striking somebody in football, it's like go lift weights, get bigger, faster, stronger, create more violent collisions, but you don't really have the mechanics or the timing or the placement down. So those are things that we try to do, is find ways, and we provide drills for teams and you know, at all levels. How do we take some of these components of contact and train it within your off-season program without violating rules? And that's something that we do as well at the tip of the spear.
Yeah, so I went back and watched some of your older videos, and, you know, from learning from Coach McNally over the last 2 months or 6 weeks. I mean, I went to a college and watched some one-on-ones, Oklahoma's, and the offensive line was falling on their face. And you talked about this on one of your videos that I went back probably 6 years ago. And why is that, Coach? Why do you see so many offensive linemen fall on their face or fall down when they're doing a one-on-one like Oklahoma?
Well, there's usually two, you know, it's a mechanical issue, it's a postural issue. And really, so when you see guys take long lead steps, you take a big lead step, well, your hips, you know, you got 1 foot in front of yourself. So we always talk about, Coach talks about, have your feet behind you when you're engaging in contact, have your feet rooted. Okay, so doing that alone doesn't guarantee you won't fall on your face, because you could still have your feet behind you. You could fall straight forward like a tree and you're going to the ground. So the guys that know how to bring their hips and uncoil their hips at the appropriate time with their feet in the ground behind their body, you're extracting your helmet. And when you're doing that, you're also bringing your hips. Your energy is going from low to high. And so instead of trying to strike a man on an equal plane where you go head to head, he's coming up at a 45 and you're trying to catch him underneath it. It takes a lot less force to move that guy, because if you can take someone's upper body that's tilted at a 45, and I don't care how big and strong he is, if you put him vertical, he's easy to move back. So it's teaching mechanics and, you know, utilizing that. When you get guys that get overextended, they drip their head, there's literally no recourse because your hips can't come through. When you take a long step, that's what you see. You got a lot of guys crashing into each other. When I take a long step, now I'm disabling my hips. I'm also putting myself in a compromised position versus any movement, and then everything moves. So you got to be able to adjust. And if you take a long step and your head's down, well, you're not generating force from the hips. You're not getting force deflection. You're trying to tattoo a guy with your face. Your hands are behind you, and ultimately you're not as good. So, and then by the way, you're losing brain cells in the process. So I think what you're saying is, and that's a real, you know, it's a real telltale thing. I mean, you say guys on the ground a lot. Well, usually it's a function of maybe some stiffness, but maybe it's a mechanical thing that can be corrected. So when we look at college players, you'll see guys that are on the ground all the time, and it's the same thing as in high school and youth. And there's guys in the NFL that do it. So those are things that need to be corrected. And it's really more of a mechanical thing than it is always an athletic thing, but certainly both come into play.
Wyatt Bode has a question here, Coach. He says, what's the best way to get players to not go chest to chest when blocking? They come up too early.
Okay, so you want to know how not to go chest to chest? Well, you use your hands. So your hands need to be in front of your body. So again, like you might have good arch and good hips and your feet rooted, and you might bring your head out. But if your elbows are flared out, or if they're short or tight, well, you're not playing long. So we talk about playing long a lot, because, you know, if you know, all that force from a guy across the line of scrimmage, if they get 2 feet in the ground and they're coming charging ahead, like a jet technique player coming ahead fast up off the ball, well, they're generating momentum. Okay, so if you can mitigate that momentum by touching them before they get their second foot in the ground, well, you got a chance to deflect and knock them off their block. You can basically render them weaker. But if you play short and you allow them into your chest, your recourse is limited. You got to be a big guy to stop that. And really, that's not. So we wouldn't like that. So one of the things that we do is we talk about the mechanics of the hands. If you can keep your elbows inside the framework of your body, we like to talk about kind of rotating the thumbs out a little bit, so you can strike with we call the tip of the spear, this portion of the hand, the lunate bone. It's the piece of the palm opposite of the thumb. Now, if I strike with that, what I have to do to strike the cylinder is I have to actually rotate my elbow in and roll my thumb out. Okay. So by doing that, now all the force that I created from the ground up is transferred through my body, through my hands. But as soon as I rotate my elbow out, okay, all that energy goes outside of the body. So you have a buttress, if you will, like a bit like a structure that supports weight in a building. And that's really the framework of your torso. So the key here is playing long, but you can't just say play long because, you know, the subtle mechanics of the hands, you know, supination of the wrists, tying the elbows down into the framework of the body. And then at that point, how long can you play while keeping those mechanics?
Yeah, Coach McNally, I know you have a question. You're writing stuff down. What do you got to ask Scott from what he said so far, Coach?
No, I'm just writing down reminders of buzzwords that he uses that will also be reminders, even though I might think the same. He has some real good buzzwords. So that's all I was writing down.
Yeah, what buzzwords were you writing down, Coach, for those guys out there that are listening, that just so they can think like you? What is he saying that you wrote down?
Well, he was talking about rotating the elbows in. He was talking about hitting with the heels of the hands, which we all know of. But, you know, are you really stressing that, et cetera? He talked about the buttress. And he's talking about playing long, which I'm 100% agreeable with. And, you know, I just make a note. Play long. Even though I might use it myself, it's just something you don't want to get chest to chest to the guy or head to head with the guy. You need space. And if you have space, you can determine what to do. So the longer my arms are, whether it's one arm is longer than two, or two arms or two hands, you have this much space when you bring your hips, whether it's a pass or run, to decide what you want to do. But when you get mired in with the shoulders and the flipper and the whatever, you're mired. They can grab you, they can pull you, they can throw you down. So probably the number one thing, if you said, what's the number one thing? Play long. That's almost fully locked out.
Yeah.
In fact, I was
Scott, how do you feel about that?
If I coached again, you know what I would do? I'd put in a 2-point stance, okay? And I'd put my hands almost, okay, here I am. As long as I'm not offsides, I'm going to have them almost there. It's going to look funny because you're maybe in college or the National Football League, but how soon? Now, if I got them here, it's still going to take longer to get them long, okay? But anyway.
Coach, Scott, are you wearing leverage cuffs, or is that a blood pressure cuff?
That's a weight belt, Coach.
He's got a blood pressure cuff because I've had some issues with my blood pressure spiking. Sometimes my bottom number will go down to like 42. And I say,
well, you don't want to tell Coach to play short, or his blood pressure will spike. You know.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, but this is the Scott Peters show. So
yes, sir.
I don't.
Thank you, Coach.
I don't want to hear my name one more time.
Okay, Coach. I won't call you anymore. But I like to think. What is Coach McNally thinking? Is there something he would ask?
Scott Peters. He is the greatest
in the world
coach in America,
and
in the world, because they play football in other countries. He knows more about the use of the hands, the shoulders, the subscapular, that I never knew what the fuck they were, but he knows more about use of the muscles, the hands, leverage than anybody. I mean, anybody. There's not a guy out there listening to us that knows more than he does. And it's not because he's an NFL coach. He learned it on his own.
So where did you learn it, Scott? Did you learn it from the MMA?
He's a world champion in jiu-jitsu. He can fucking kill you with one hand. So just imagine.
I'm not killing anybody. You know,
he wouldn't kill anybody legally, but he's the man.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing.
How did you learn it?
Well, I don't claim to know anything because I could change, just like Coach. If we saw a better thing today, we're going to change it. So it's always evolving. So first off, and anybody we're always open to people's opinions and ideas. So that's kind of where I think it originates, is you gotta be willing to look at everything and say, is this the optimal way to do it? Is there a better methodology? So I think what happened with me was I got out of football because I started this MMA business, and I was in there getting my ass kicked by little guys. I'm telling you, we had a guy in there that named Henry Cejudo. Okay, many listeners probably know who he is. Maybe he's a UFC champion. He won a UFC championship. He's also a gold medalist in the Olympic Games for the United States. And this guy is 125 pounds soaking wet, and he can take an NFL lineman, bring him to the ground. There's nothing you can do about it. And so he's an example of a guy that, like, you're like, okay, well, size, mass, and speed he's got quickness and unbelievable quickness, but his strength, his power, his size, physical mass, it's unfathomable to most linemen. So when I got in there with these types of guys, and even when I started out, it wasn't guys at that level. It was guys that were just bankers, rolling around in a gi. I'm serious. I was in Charlotte, North Carolina, playing for the Panthers, and I had an ankle injury that kind of plagued my career. And so I was non-weight bearing for a period, and I went in and tried jiu-jitsu on the ground, and like I said, I think, Coach, I could bench over 500 pounds, and okay, well, that's great, but that doesn't stop this 55-year-old banker who weighs half my size from putting me in an arm bar. And I'm like, well, there's something to that. So I got around the guys, these fighters. I saw that the control they had. You don't see really top level fighters charging ahead with their head down. They're getting knocked out,
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's true. And so guys that operate with great control, great efficiency of the body, you look at the way that they root their bodies. You can look at any martial art. You can wrestling, grappling, jiu-jitsu, judo, boxing,
Sumo.
What's that? Sumo? Yeah,
Sumo.
You name it. Like, what's one thing that all of those have in common? And you could say, well, they're the most optimal and efficient movements of the body to generate the maximum amount of force with the greatest degree of control. And they're also designed to attack the man where he's weak. And so then you see about football, it's like, no, let's just see who's bigger, faster, stronger, and crush a guy with sheer, speed, like force equals mass times acceleration type thing. When we're talking about playing long, if I have a defensive lineman, a 3 technique in the NFL, on the ground and with his hand on the ground, and I walked up to him in his stance, I'd much prefer to hit him before he gets out of his stance. Wouldn't you?
Yes.
Do you want that guy taking charge, flying up the field? No. So one of the ways you can do that is by playing long. And Coach talked about crowding the line. There's other things you can do, but in the end, it's the playing long helps mitigate that force, because you're taking away they already have mass. Now you're trying to limit their acceleration. So you can effectively limit their force output when you play long. When you win the first touch, it's very disruptive, because all coaches in the OLine, I think it's universal. Hey, your second step, get your second step down. Well, we don't always say that, Jim and I, because it might be your 15th step or something. But the point being is you got to have your feet in the ground when contact occurs, right? You don't want to get caught with a foot hanging off the ground. But guys that jet off the ball, there's a moment when they're vulnerable. That's when they take that first step. I'd like to touch them when they take that first step. That's me. And our guys would like to do that because we understand that they're not rooted at that time. So they're effectively not, able to utilize all of their assets. And if you play short, you're allowing the guy to get his feet in the ground. He's the one disrupting you most of the time. So that's why we need 400-pound linemen, just so you don't get knocked over. So we think, like, if you can use great mechanics, obviously size is you want to have good size. I'm not saying you want to be small, but you can get away with more with guys who have better mechanics, get their hands on faster, guys with longer arms, guys that understand the mechanics and get in and make that first touch. Winning the first touch is a huge component to it.
Yeah, we have some questions here. Armani's asking, when setting with spot, are you teaching your guys to get to need a crotch? Can y'all decipher that? Coach McNally, you've got some experience with podcasts. I guess is he talking about in the pass set? Because you haven't even gotten into the pass set yet. And it's
too vague a question.
Yeah,
I think I'm guessing he's talking about, because he talks about a spot. I think he's probably talking about pass pro.
Yeah.
Yes, he's talking about pass.
So
pro.
you talked a little bit about the body and the hands and the run game, but that posture, you got to have good posture in pass protection too. And I never really thought about it, but when Coach talks about one arm's longer than two, you said that in one of your older videos. Talk about that pass proing and arm is longer than two and not punching with two hands. There's still a lot of high school coaches that teach the two-hand punch in pass pro. And
there's a lot of reasons why you would want to use independent hands. And the reason there's several. One, I mean, there's a lot of them. And one is that, you're playing longer, because coach pointed out one arm's longer than two. If I shoot two here, I can get one here. Now I'm attacking a guy at length. So again, mitigating force, touching him first, trying to get disruption, but really control. If I throw two hands, let me ask you this. I mean, how many guys have you seen knock someone out in a boxing fight with two hands, a two-handed punch? Never saw it.
That's exactly what I told coach. You'd never see a boxer go like this. So,
maybe it's happened, but you never saw that guy because you didn't make it long.
Rock'em sock'em robots. I don't even know if they could punch. Coach, could rock'em sock'em? Could you punch with both hands and rock'em sock'em robots? That's before me and Coach Peters' time, Coach McNally.
Yeah. No, I never played those video games.
Well, I'll say, another thing about playing long like that and using independent hands is that when you play with an outside lead hand, in other words, you're striking, if you have a player that's outside of you, if you're a guard, you got a three technique just to look at it easy.
Mm-hmm.
That the nearest point is your outside hand, right? So, and where are we vulnerable? Inside. So if I want to throw two hands, a lot of times, and one of the issues, especially in the league, in the NFL and other levels too, is that one of the biggest pass rushes we see is the double wiper. They're coming in and wiping hands. So when you throw two, they get two for the price of one. So if I throw two hands and you wipe my hands, look what's happening to my torso. If I shoot this hand and you wipe it, I can replace it. I'm not, committing all my body to it. I'm not lunging, leaning. I'm using that rotational force that you're generating, just like in any sport. Guys that know how to torque, boxers, baseball players, every athlete uses that kind of posture. So the thing that it does, it allows for your spine to stay neutral, your spine to stay vertical, you to be in a good position. Where a lot of guys get beat is that, number one, they're shorter, but then they have a tendency to lunge and lean into their strike with two hands, because that's how they feel like they're going to generate more force. And I think one of the things that is probably trained into them because of the prevalence of bench press, and it's not that I don't like bench press. I just think that that's probably one of the issues at the lower levels, because kids are doing more bench press reps than they are striking in the off season. So then they think, I got to come out and hammer you. Well, that's great, but you just got smoked because you don't have great posture. You don't have a bench behind you on the field. You got your feet in the ground. That's it. So having playing with independent hands allows for length. It allows for first touch. It allows for posture. It also allows for squareness. So when I'm striking here with my outside hand, it helps keep my shoulder square. And we know that, especially on the edges, tackles, they try to turn. You see guys that use both hands, they reach. Well, number one, you get chopped inside, right? That's the easiest direct route to the QB. Number two is you're opening a great platform and a surface for them to strike your chest. So, that's why coaches all day long, I don't think anybody on this podcast listening is saying, yeah, we should turn. Everyone's saying not to turn. But instead of saying not to turn, let's tell them how to correct that and say, well, here's how you stay square. So, and I think that's one thing that you'll see that coach that resonates to people. There's a lot of that in coaching. It's like, hey, don't do this. Well, okay, what do I do? Instead of saying don't turn, because it's easy to do. I've done it myself as a coach, so I get it. But being able to really give them the specifics to help them stay square. So by playing with independent hands, one of the things about it is, and when we talk about independent hands, we have, you have two hands, and obviously if you're throwing double straight punches, then what are you really effectively countering? What are you combating? You're playing shorter. You're going to have to figure out one of those hands is going to have to refit itself, because you're never going to get two great hands on a guy's chest. I'm sorry, you just never will. So if you throw an outside pillar, for example, and that's a long strike, right?
Boom.
Now you're getting the benefit of disruption, and maybe you can get a handle on that. But then the inside hand has to do something too. So if I throw two pillars and he wipes my hands inside, I'm beat. But if I use my inside hand as an under strike, now I can take away, I got disruption and I got the ability to stop power, force by deflection. Or if I have a clamp, which is an inside out strike to the shoulder, now I'm protected from an inside cross face. So independent hands allows you to account for the various types of rushes and players that you're going to see. So if I'm throwing double strikes, there is a time and a place to do that, I'm sure. But not every time, because if you're sitting out there and you're throwing two hands at guys, you're going to find a guy that wipes you, okay? You're going to find a guy that's longer than you, you're going to find that your posture is compromised. You're going to get run over, run around, or he's going to run underneath you. So there's just issues with that. I think that's why we really reference playing with independent hands and playing long, and not doing it in a manner that is kind of compromising posture, because the only thing you really have on the field, you don't have a bench press behind you. You got the ground, so you got to draw that energy. And by doing this mechanic, you have the best of all worlds.
So Robert's got a question. Wyatt said, "Good question, Robert." So they're posting these on YouTube. When you say playing long, does that just refer to the initial strike, or are you teaching linemen to play long through the entire block? Do you no longer climb the defender and take away space?
Well, and coach may disagree, but we'll climb after you've played long. Like you play long, get into the block, and then climb on a run block. On a pass block, you want to play long throughout the duration. You don't want him in your body, So even if he finds himself into your body, okay, well, we want to get back to length, because now I can keep him at length. I don't worry about getting him beat. We don't want him into our body, right? But in run blocking, you can play long to mitigate that initial charge. You can deflect him. And once you've deflected him, the way you finish is, of course, climbing. Bring your hips to his and close the gap that way. That loads him up. It creates a vertical spine for him, and it makes him more easily controlled. But I don't want to, if I'm playing long throughout, that's where guys get pulled and shed. So you want to really, use your hips to climb, I think, to close the distance on those types of run blocks.
You made a great point on one of your earlier videos from the Tip of the Spear on YouTube about the punch and the grab. Can you talk about that? I think, do you still teach that, the catching the fly? Like we talked about
the fly. Yeah, definitely. I mean, the thing is, like, someone I really respect, and he passed away. It's Tunch Ilkin, and Coach knew Tunch, and he was a great hand expert. And I did a lot of Tunch punch stuff in college, and I loved it because, and I tell everybody the same advice about it now. It's like, what made that great was, like, you're just actively throwing hands all the time. You're hitting things. The more hand drills you're doing, the better. And I loved it, and it was so fun to watch Tunch just knock the shit out of Reggie White, with great strikes, and just watching an undersized player use hand skills like that. That was amazing. So the issue that I had with it was, and we have with it, is that there's no issue. It's great, except that when you throw a heavy strike, you get good disruption, but that doesn't end the rush. And a lot of times guys will punch and then they still lose. You might have a great punch and still get beat. So the key is that, can you throw a punch? Can you get length, long, disruption, all that? But then can you grab something? Because then, there's a correlation. If you grab something, well, you have a chance to stay in front of something. If you don't, that punch might be all for naught. So there's an emphasis on quick speed hands and fast handles, and getting your hands on something to grab cloths. That way you have an opportunity to counter the next move. If you throw hands, you're just trying to, hey, sometimes you'll make that highlight reel where you're swinging for the fences, you hit a home run, but you strike out too. So we're trying to hit for percentages, and that means throw hands fast, play long, and secure a handle.
Yeah, we have a question here from John, and I see on Twitter these high school kids going to these camps, and they're doing pass pro, and the defensive linemen, they're just bull rushing like every single time. Mm-hmm. So this question kind of, goes in that line. How to defend, or what technique to use when D lineman use his head crown of the helmet first? Still bridge technique? That trap. I didn't even know about the trap until, I started talking to Coach McNally. Talk about that.
The trap it's a punishment. It's a punishment for guys that want to do that, And so we were talking previously about offensive linemen where they find themselves on the ground. Well, they're doing the same thing over there. Why are offensive linemen on the ground? Well, because they probably missed their target, or they can't react to movement, or they got snapped off. They just got grabbed, shocked, shed, and thrown because they don't have their base and their hips underneath them. So really, the defensive linemen are susceptible to the same. So anytime you want to bring a crown of your helmet toward me, well, I'm trying to punish you for that. And that means I want to make you eat dirt. I want you to have to scoop your body off the ground as many times as I can make you do that in a game. Get a big guy to have to continually scrape his body off the ground, it takes something from him. So I'm going to take from him. I'm going to allow him to do that. I hope that rule changes because, they say it's illegal to do that. But, there's a big, pretty interesting that I got exposure to this, that in the NFL, they did a study on the head impacts from the linemen. And the number one cause of head helmet impacts in the NFL, would you know what it might be? Take a guess. What kind of play?
I would say that it's probably, I mean, I'm just guessing. It might be, I don't know, a goal line. That's what I'm thinking.
It's pass
goal
protection.
line
I mean,
on the
talking
curve
about the most volume, the number of head impacts that happen every season. It's by far and away the number one cause of head impacts is bull rush on pass protection. So it's because of that very issue. So when a defender puts his helmet down, here's the issue: is that when he puts his helmet down on the crown, well, then he's really taking away a good surface for you to strike. So therefore, the only way you can actually effectively strike a player like that is to throw an illegal head strike, or you try to capture, strike a shoulder, but that's a hard shoulder. So the one way, and it's very hard to stop a guy like that. So what you do is, again, like it kind of goes opposite of, it's forced deflection. We're deflecting him down. So when a guy's got good hips underneath him, he's coming underneath him, we're not going to trap that because he's got good postural control. So when you got a guy with a good head up and his hips are coming through on a bull rush, that's a fair bull rush. Well, we're going to try to hop and elevate him. So if he's coming like this, we're just going to try to hop and try to deflect him up. But if he's insists on putting his helmet down, well, we'd like to put him, just kind of take him where he wants to go. He doesn't need to, he doesn't need to crash into you and into your head. So those are things that that we found interesting when we looked at the data. And so the league's really looking at that. They want to really reduce those impacts. And I think part of that may come from officiating, but I think that that sometimes these guys are using their helmets as a battering ram, and it puts the offensive lineman in a position where there's not a strike surface. So in that case, you get guys you can certainly trap them, and that's a way you can kind of render them ineffective, if you will.
What is the technique? What's the coaching points on coaching the trap? Because I mean, I think it would be so effective to these kids that go to these camps and they're facing these guys that bull rush and they just want to put their head down and run them right over.
Yeah, and it's a tough question to answer, and I say that because we can teach the trap. The issue is that you want to make sure you have the skill set, the suite of skills that you need. You got to understand your base. You got to have a good way of operating from a good base. Because what I see is that some players, you give them the trap, it's like giving a kid a gun. They don't know. Everything. Or if your only tool is a hammer, everything you see is a nail. They're going to try to trap everything. And the problem with that, you really compromise yourself. You can put it's a risk because number one, a lot of times these traps don't happen in the right timing or the place. If you're going to trap someone, you should try to do it on the line of scrimmage. And you'll see guys that kind of get knocked back and then they throw a guy. Well, you might be throwing that guy into the quarterback. So there's some things that, before you teach the trap, in my view, and this is something I learned as a coach, being a full-time coach, is that, hey, I could go out to a clinic and teach a trap and everybody thinks it's great. And then you get, but the problem is it's like a tool. It's not the end all be all. So you got to understand and have the other mechanics before you get into the trap, in my opinion. But it is an excellent tool. So when people do give you those kinds of postures, they set themselves up. You're taking what they're giving you as opposed to trying to force it.
He's got two types of traps. Scott Peters has. One's called a buckle. And
that's a type of trap. Yeah,
or something. But anyway, he's got a couple of different ways he knocks their hands down when they bull rush.
Yeah, some of them are when they're coming in. If you see it coming in, we'll attack the hand coming in. You'll see that more on the edges, long arms, things like that. When you're seeing guys inside, I mean, their hands are coming up now. So usually, if they get a long arm, it's more like like Cameron Hayward. He's got a really vicious long arm. You got to get underneath it because he's got great posture. He's not leaning. You're not trapping. Yeah. But there's ways that you got to address it. So, you have guys that come in with two hands, they get lunged, they lean, and you could do it from the interior. You can certainly do that. Most of the time that happens after contact. So, but on the edges, it's a lot of times you'll see traps that happen after a guy gets the long arm in, but sometimes you wedge it, sometimes you refit it, sometimes you attack the elbow. There's times that you want to trap it, and the trap happens on the edges a lot of times before impact, and then probably more often than not, though, with the length of some of these edge rushers' arms, they're getting their hands on you. So then you got to know how to address that. And I think one of the things is that you got to understand the type of animal that you're hunting. Okay, so if you have evidence on film that this guy is trappable, well, that makes him a candidate. If you have a guy that because you can put yourself in a real risky spot if you try to trap a guy who's got great hip extension, because then you're compromised. Because usually one of the issues with a trap is knowing when to do it and when not to do it. And if the hand placement's high on your body, even if he has bad posture, it's generally hard to trap that because it's hard to get that removed. You gotta separate your body from his hand. and it's a little high. If it's lower, and you know that his posture is bad, then really effectively the only thing keeping him standing is you. Well, that's a great candidate to trap, right? And so then knowing where and when to use it, the type of player to use it against, because the issue and the risk of it is, again, if a guy has good hips and then you're really doing an action that's going high to low on a trap. So we always talk about low to high generally, but when would you use a high to low? Only when the guy's really likely to go to the ground. Because if I go high to low and he's got good hip extension, now I've exposed myself to get run over, basically.
Yes, sir. Steve Saunier, who's the offensive line coach at West Florida, he texted me this earlier today. He wanted to ask you basic question. When you get a rookie free agent or in college or high school, a freshman transfer, what are you telling him about stance? How are you getting him into the stance you want? What is the teaching progression as far as bringing him along on what you want him to learn step by step? Are you reaching scoot footwork first, clogging second, shuffle third, etc.? Whatever the progression he wants to talk about. That's what he's telling me. So I guess first about stance. Let's hit the stance, and then we'll get to the rest of that. He asked a lot there.
We have to correct everybody we get, usually to some degree with a stance, because you got to make sure. And there's different types of stances you'll have versus types of plays. If you're depending on what you're trying to do, you may have a stagger, you may not have a stagger, but that's all based on your feet, the location. But then really, if you're looking at the posture and the weight distribution, and then you look at the angles, and obviously one of the things you'll see guys do is you want to make sure that this is a real simple one, but your hips need to be inside your knees need to be inside your ankles, however you want to say that, because if your knees are outside of your ankles, for example, well, you're really not moving well, you're inefficient. So to move laterally off the ball, you're not preloaded. So we talk about like the weight distribution on the feet. You talk about where you want that weight. You don't want to be on your heels. You want to be kind of on the insteps, the arches, the ball of the toe, the foot, that component. You want to make sure that they have good weight transfer. So the weight transfer is not happening on the snap. It's preloaded. It should look even. It should look comfortable. And then, kind of looking at the postures and making sure that the back is not rounded. It's arched. You want to get guys to bend. And you want to be able to be in a position where, you're not having to change your posture, because if you have optimal posture, just like if you were doing a heavy back squat, I mean, if you're all rounded at the back, you're in bad shape, right? So why would you want to start your stance like that? Now, you're not going to get that explosive movement off the ball. So you want to make sure you're tight in from an anatomical standpoint. Those are just some things like looking at the feet first, make sure that there's a good weight distribution, looking at the spine, making sure it's neutral, arched. We don't like guys that dump down, meaning they're resting on their body, because that you want to have some arch, because then you're more inclined to move efficiently and quickly and suddenly off the ball if those things are present. And then the other thing is kind of looking at where your hand placement is. If you're in a 2-point, we'll have the hands on the thigh boards. If you're in a 3-point, you have an offhand. The offhand should be accessible. You don't want to sit there and reach around and grab your rear end or be too kind of turned. So you have a hand that's in a position where you can strike, and then your down hand should be pretty light relative to your weight. I mean, some guys, you should be able to, in many ways, unless you're on goal line, pick your hand up. You should be able to pick it up in a 3-point if you're in that, without falling on your face. And so those are the little things that I think are important. And then all of those things said, those are general guidelines, and then you'd want to adjust for your scheme. So sometimes guys want to have a big stagger, and other times they don't. So and sometimes you might stagger for a pass, but for a 3rd and down and 6, the tackle will have a big stagger because he's got speed rush. But first down, he may not have such a stagger because we're coming off the ball on a run, and it's just kind of putting your body in position, to be effective for what you're trying to do. So every time, every snap, really the stance will adjust. I mean, to some degree, and you want to try not to give away tendencies, but every play is going to be different based on what you're trying to do. And that's really more of a subtle loading of weight, making sure that you're doing that. And I think it's something that we address early on, because it's like you would expect players to know that, but they don't all know that coming in. So we make sure we cover that with them. And some guys have more work to do than others, but the stance is a big part because it's a foundation. And then once you get that, then you start working your footwork.
Yes, sir. So he's got, are you reaching scoot footwork first, clogging second, shuffle third, etc. Do you understand what he means there, Coach McNally? Can you Can you elaborate?
Too many questions.
Okay, thank you very much. That's why I got you, Coach McNally.
I mean, he can ask Scott what he interprets as why he would scoot his feet, which means you're moving kind of lateral. You may lose a little ground, but like I say, those are too many variables that would.
It's just kind of, I don't know the context, but if you're doing
many different plays, so I think Scott could maybe talk about 2 or 3 of his favorite footwork that he has to use a lot because of plays they use. So what I'm saying to you that the Cleveland Browns run maybe 4 or 5 basic plays, and maybe there's some certain footwork that they practice more than other.
You want to talk about
more of an expert at that area?
Do you believe, like, until I mean, we did it last year. We kept our shoulders square all the time. If we were running outside zone, inside zone, and I hadn't even met Coach McNally. But once I met Coach McNally, he started telling me about, it ain't open cross run anymore, like Coach Alex Gibbs taught, that your shoulders are square. It made so much sense to me. So on plays where the ball is hitting outside, do you teach? What's the footwork you teach for your offensive linemen, and do their shoulders stay square?
Well, it kind of depends on where the ball is going. If you have sometimes it's really stretch or wide zone, and you're really in the D gap, and so sometimes you're trying to run a lot of QB like nakeds off of that. You're trying to get the defense running. Those kind of cases, you'll have a turn, but when you get a little turn because you're trying to really influence the defense when you're running. Now, there's times when you might on the mid zone, like Coach talks about all the scoot footwork. Those things come to play. And those you could pick up everything because you're square. So we would agree that you want to be as square as you can for as long as you can, in both phases, run and pass. And so the scoot allows you to play with feet behind, hands in front, allows you to uncoil your hips. You're playing from a really good position of strength. It allows you to pick up all the movement that's there because, if you turn your body and a guy crosses your face, and there's ways that you can lose, from penetration, and combinations get beat up, especially if you're like an uncovered guard and you got a G bubble. And there's times when that 5 spikes and you don't really know. You're looking there, you get split. There's a lot of things that can happen when you're not square. So we're not entirely square. That's a general rule that we have, is we want to be as square as we can for as long as we can in both phases. But there's times when you got to capture certain leverages based on the play. So you'll see certain times when guys they're more open running perimeter style or things that are hitting on the edges that may look like turning, but really at the end of the day, we're trying to, even if we are having to turn to capture a landmark, we're trying to engage when we're fully square. We don't want to engage when you're turned, because that's when guys get beat.
Yeah, so there's quite a few questions about this. Coach Stevens, and he's from California. He's the offensive line coach in Mission Viejo. He's asking about, can you talk about your principles and the drills you run for dropping the post? Like, I always watch the Super Bowl highlights, like that 15-minute clip that they put on YouTube, and the right guard for the Eagles, that's from Oregon, I believe. Like, there was a play, I said, oh, this kid lost his post foot. I was telling my team. But then I meet Coach McNally, and he believes that you do drop your post foot. So I've asked him, and I'm going to ask you, like, when you're working on pass pro with your players in the off season or whenever, I mean, and they lose their post foot, how do you coach that? The principles of dropping the post foot. Because, I mean, I played for a college coach that learned from Coach McNally, Coach Ramsire, that was the head coach at Wilmington. So he talked about the post and pounding the post and kicking. So, what can you tell the high school coaches about that? Like when you're a right guard and you got an A-gap player and you're on the man side.
Well, yeah. So Coach McNally will, he believes in dropping the post in certain cases. And I do too, where you have to, when you have if you're playing and you're posting down on a guy, like you're a guard, you're posting down. If I go too far into the line, with my inside foot, now there's an up post. We'll talk about up kick post, that you might have, but really, like, if a guy's edging you, you're forced to drop your post. So it's a recovery method. I mean, if you get a guy, it's a 3 technique and you're a guard and a guy crosses your face, instead of trying to pound the post, if he's already got to your midline or beyond, and you try to pound the post, meaning you're stepping in, you're already beat. So naturally, players will recover by having to drop their post, and so they get long with their outside hand. Coach McNally will talk about that. But, because when you're getting edged and beat inside, let's say the 3 technique spikes hard inside and he gets that hand and you're trying to, pound the post, it's too late. You're done. So you got to pull that. You got to pull the hand. You use your outside hand to reattach. You can play long. If you drop the post, it allows you at least strength, because one of the things that we talk about when we talk about principles of contact is feet behind, right? So we're strongest when you have a foot behind you. It's a brace. So instead of, and like a lot of people take exception when they hear dropping the post, because it goes against it's like religion, insulting someone's religion. So the thing that we I think one of the ways to kind of describe it is like, well, you don't drop it or open it or turn. You're square. You want to stay square, but you just want to bring a brace. So instead of, some people prefer to say like Frank Pollock had said, he goes, I don't like that term. I like brace the post is better for me. I'm like, okay, but it's the same concept. You're just trying to lose a little ground, but you don't want to open yourself, because that's a big distinction, is making sure you're not opening. You're not really opening and turning. You want to try to stay square, because it goes back to that principle: stay as square as you can for as long as you can. But if you're up, if your post foot is high, meaning you're pounding the post on a crossface, and he gets to that midline and he knocks the hand down, there's very little you can do. So there's a natural element where guys will have that good reactive athleticism. They're going to do that, and then we thought, well, maybe that's something you incorporate into teaching, because then you can. When you get those cross spaces, you're in better position to pick those up, and you can still play long. You play longer with the post that's dropped as well, as opposed to a cross space where you're trying to pound the post. Now you're short armed and he knocks your hand down. He's already at your hip. So if you drop or brace the post, now you have the option to play long with your inside hand as well.
Coach McNally, do you have any questions?
That would be no different if a center lined up on your right shoulder and cross faced you the other way.
Right. Yes.
Even if you didn't coach him, okay, and he kicked with his right foot, and he crosses your face, he's automatically, even if you don't coach him, going to drop his left foot. So that's no different than, because a lot of coaches say feet before hands. That means the guy goes inside, don't shoot your hands, they'll knock it down. Move your feet first. Well, when the guy goes inside, it's natural to drop your inside foot. You become the other guard. That's the only way you're going to stay in front of them. And I like to talk about not even using the inside hand, because they're going to knock it down. So it's almost like you put your inside hand behind your back and just use your outside arm. But I'm not going to get into that whole discussion, because a lot of people think I'm crazy. But anyway, if you just gave a kid a drill, kick outside, go inside, and you never said anything about the post, and you just gave them a wave drill, they might kick outside, but when they go inside, they'll drop that inside foot, because you can't move with your foot locked. You lock your hips. You don't ever want to be locked.
Right.
Yeah. So how do you feel about that, what Coach is saying, Scott?
I agree with him. And, if a guy goes inside, exactly, your hip is locked if you have that post foot high. And again, if you drop it, it allows you to play long. And I think it's a natural reactive movement. And like the coaches point out, like a center on a cross space, well, we're not teaching the center to pound the post, because he's got a direct route. You got to switch your feet. But the key, and again, just for the coaches listening, because I think it's been one of those deals where, you say that, people go, you're crazy. Like Coach said, it's because, again, it goes back. It's like religion. It's something that you just know. It's burned in
Jerry
your brain.
Wampler.
Yeah, it goes way back.
Jerry
right?
Wampler invented it, and then I gave it to the world.
Yeah.
And then
Yep.
and
now you're on Twitter giving everything to everybody, Coach.
Yeah.
But Coach, now he's taking it back. See, that's why Coach McNally's the best ever, because he'll change his opinion, not because he's got an ego. He's no ego here. He wants to put the best information forward because he has evidence, and he's going to make those decisions based on what works the best. And that's where that's what makes Coach such a great, one of the reasons why he's such a great coach.
Yeah. And like just learning from Coach McNally, like he watches the mess ups for the offensive line, and why is the guy messing up? Or he watches the good plays of the offensive line, and then he develops that into his technique, which I mean I never would have thought of. I thought as an offensive line coach, you just had your way of doing it, and it was that way. But after meeting Coach McNally, he actually studies what the tackle does on the backside, and if it works, he changes. So Armani asked, can you define the corkscrew? I don't know what the corkscrew is. Wyatt Teller, who's from Virginia, uses it a lot against Fletcher Cox. Very useful.
I think he's referring to a refit. So when you get a hand on there, yeah. So we, instead of saying, a lot of times players they'll refit and they wind up, they try to recover, and it's no good, because what happens is you've just compromised. You've turned your body, you've opened yourself up. Like you're not very strong. Plus, it takes longer to replace the hand. You want to get on a guy like Fletcher Cox. You need everything you have. You can't play with one hand in him if he gets his hands on you. So if he gets a hand underneath you, he's long arming you, stabbing you. He's got a real strong right hand. So you want that refit to be like a corkscrew instead of a big looping wind up. So in other words, you're attacking the elbow, and you're trying to, in a corkscrew, it's a subtle, tight refit. You want to rub the elbow, and you're using your hips to do it. So when you'll see guys will try to refit and they get wide. Everybody's done this. You get pried open. It's extremely hard to recover. So what we're trying to do is tighten that movement. So when you train at the corkscrew, you want to get a really tight refit. So you should never lose connection with the defender's arm. You should never lose connection with his body. The only thing that loses connection is going to be your hand. So like the arm should remain somewhat connected with his arm, right? Because then you could deflect his arm upward. But where you're vulnerable anytime you refit, as you guys probably know, because when you refit, that's that moment in time when you take a hand off. So you want to limit your vulnerabilities by tightening up the refit. And there's a way to do it where, and I learned it from jiu-jitsu, is where you can actually attack the elbow, similar to like an arm bar in jiu-jitsu, although you don't have the leverage to hurt someone, but it's uncomfortable and he wants his hand off. So we'll use certain subtle movements like that to help protect our quarterback, because it's him or us.
I don't know if y'all have ever been asked this, but like, if I go to a pro football game, sometimes I'll just watch the offensive tackles, and those dudes, like on pass, a lot of times they're just staring down like that 5 technique. That guy, he's got a pass block. Where is the offensive lineman's eyes supposed to be before the snap and not give something away like that? Have you ever been asked that?
Oh yeah, and you know what, you see it every day. Coach probably agrees, but you'll see like high school kids and they'll line up for a one-on-one. It's like, I don't want to look at him. And it's like, well, why wouldn't you want to look at him? We want, hey, look at that guy. Obviously, if you have a silent count and you're looking, you have to priff the ball. You got to see your guy. That's challenging. You don't want to turn your head, but you can tilt your head. You want your vision on that. So it's not a surprise. It's hard enough to block these guys anyway. But the more information you can gather before the snap, like, you're looking at everything. You're assessing everything prior to the snap. So to say that, you don't want to look at him to give it away, it's like I said, it's hard enough to block him anyway. Hey, it's not a big secret. You got a guy in a one-on-one pass rush, and he knows it, it, even if he doesn't know it. You know what? You want to look at him, and then you get an idea from stance, depth, demeanor of his stance. You look at the alignments. You look at maybe the safety rotation. You look at some of the linebackers, where they're located. You can get some good information prior to the snap. So you're not just looking at him. So you're looking kind of deep, and then your eyes progress to the man that you're blocking. And when you look at the guy, you'll have an option. You'll have a better, you usually function better, because again, I see this, like, imagine this, like if you had to say, hey, Troy, close your eyes. And then when you open them, I'm boxing.
I'm fighting you, and I got my eyes closed. I mean,
your eyes are closed. And then all of a sudden I say, open them. And then you see a punch coming at you. You'd rather be seeing that body before it comes. So why would, same thing. I mean, you'd rather have as much visual, acuity. You want to see everything, and that's the point. Okay. So you're taking cues, and as guys get their eye progression changes. But in the end, if you got a guy in a one-on-one, or you got a guy, anytime in a pass pro situation, you want to see where he's at, and you're not you're not getting anything out of that by tricking him by looking down. But we see it happen. We see a ton of high school kids that just do that. It's weird. It's like it's almost universal. And so just look at your guy, man. It's going to help you a ton. Just make sure you look at
no doubt.
You don't want to turn we don't want to turn, but you can kind of like just tilt. You got to tilt. You got your vision on him. You can see him, but you still have a good periphery of what else is happening. So it's like you don't want to stare in a tunnel vision manner, but you can see it. Makes sense.
I'll tell you something that I know works.
Tell me.
Coached it, but I would coach it, whatever. Okay, let's say you're in the shotgun, and you got to look at the ball, but then you got to look at your guy, and you kind of peripheral periph means your periphery, the whole peripheral vision. And so, but if you're, say, right tackle, okay, and you close your outside eye, okay, you can periph the center when he bobs his head easier than you can if you have two eyes open. If you have two eyes open, the focus of both eyes limits your intensity of the focus of the inside eye. So let's say I'm up in my stance, okay, and I close my outside eye. I got to block the guy outside of me, okay? And as soon as I see the head bob, I close the inside eye and I immediately kick out on the outside tackle. That'll help my timing. But what I'm saying is, let's say you have some kids that are just oversetting on the tackle or lose their contact. If they close their inside eye, okay, and they just look at the tackle, okay, or let's do this. Let's say an offensive tackle is getting beat a lot to his inside, okay?
Yeah.
Close the outside eye. Close the outside eye.
I never thought of that.
Inside eye will be the one that's focused on the guy's inside more, because you aren't going to see the outside whole part of his body. So like right now, I am closing this eye, and this is my outside eye. Okay, I'm closing. Yeah. So all I am is looking at the guy with my inside eye. Okay. I would
got you, Coach.
I would fucking teach it. But
I never thought of that. God, have you ever heard of that? Have you ever?
No, well, all you gotta do is.
I understand. Is this? My question would be, because when you close two, when you have. Yeah, Coach, go ahead.
I'm not
Coach
saying
McNally, what'd you say?
Would do it. I would say, hey, try this. You want to see the center?
Yeah, as a training, like in training. Well, I think
your outside eye. You can see that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I can definitely see more over here.
Both eyes open.
It's true. Wonder why that is. I mean, I don't know the bio. We need.
Well, because you got two fucking eyes looking at something where the other could close one. But I mean, I'm just saying. The only reason I ever thought about it is a lot of kids get beat inside, and that's because they're looking at whatever they're looking at the wrong thing, right? So if they close their outside eye, all they can see is the inside eye. I mean, maybe that's
Coach,
correct.
Are you saying that you do that in training, not necessarily in a game?
I would train a kid that way and see how he likes it, and does it work? If they will give me the advantage of trying it and saying, Coach, I don't like it. Coach, I like it. It's almost like I'd close my outside eye so I could periph the center when he bobs his head. And as soon as his head bobs, I open my outside eye. Okay. And what I'm saying is, because I'm going to have believe it or not, I'm going to have more tunnel focus with one eye than I am two.
Yeah.
Because this other eye is coming from the other side of my head.
Yeah. I never thought of that.
Physics behind it.
Yeah. We have a question here from Ariel. What are your coaching points to deal with the bull pull move on the interior? Are you familiar with that terminology? I guess a bull rush, and then they try to throw you.
It's one of the top moves. There's guys that do it all the time. I mean, it's a good move because guys' posture gets out of whack. So you got to deal with power. You get guys that lean. They don't have great posture. They're not playing long. So, and that happens to even guys that train to play long. So we talk about it. Here's the thing, like we try to drill a lot of stuff and train our guys, but it's like, nobody's perfect. And trust me, we get beat a lot, and we have good ideas, we think, but sometimes it's like, it's not always effective. And so what happens is guys that even try to play long, even if they've developed that skill set, there's a time when the defender might get into your body. So what I would say to do is, once you get your hands on him, you get some kind of a handle. And if you know that he's that type of a player, which a lot of kids do in high school because it's one of the easier ways to win. I mean, the bull rush is the number one move, right? It's the most primitive pass rush in football, and there's a reason why they do it, because it works. And then what you get from there is you get compromise of posture. So why does it work? Well, because they're trying to knock you back, and then what happens is guys will feed into that, they'll lean into it, and then it sets up a good quick pull, right? So when you're doing that, you want to really optimize your posture as a lineman. And so if the guy gets into your body, sometimes you'll find yourself a little short. That's what we will lock and hop, and you get extension. If you bring back extension, and really you're actively arching your head, you're putting yourself back in position, because you could lose position throughout the course of the block. And a lot of times when you get those bull rushes, your players are going to, their inclination is to push back with their head. Well, yeah, you're smoked. I mean, if you do that. So, but it does happen, and there's ways to recover. And to me, it's getting back to extension and reestablishing an arch, and you can do that when you build it into the hop. So, and the hop allows you to, reposition yourself in that way where you can take away that vulnerability. But if you kind of keep your feet where they are and you keep your head forward, yeah, they got a lot of different options when they can beat you, especially coming off of power. I don't know if that answers the question well enough or not.
Yeah, I think you do. I think you did a good job there, Coach. When you run block, do you believe in the foot fire and pass blocking?
Yeah.
Do you believe in the foot fire? And what's your coaching points on that?
Fire your feet, man. Fire your feet every time, all the time. Like you see kids that don't do. Yeah. You're gonna get smoked, man. You got nothing. If you fire your feet, it doesn't matter. Like anytime there's space and time between you and somebody, your feet should be fired. Even once you're into the block, you don't take big long steps. Guys that take long steps, they get shed, they get pulled, they get shocked and shed. They get their posture out of whack. But if your feet are firing, the issue is this. I mean, you have the ground is the only draw. That's the only source of energy you can tap into. You don't have a bench press, like I said earlier, to hold structure for you. It's the ground. So how do you use the ground? Well, if you take your foot up off the ground, again, I'll go back to boxing analogy. How powerful is a jab when you strike somebody with your front foot up off the ground? It's not. So when you watch the timing of the strike, when they jab, their feet are in the ground. So if you punch a guy with a foot off the ground, you're not fully tapping into your energy, because the source of the energy comes from the ground. Your body's delivering it, but the ground is that surface that you draw from. So foot fire, and we don't know how fast contact occurs. You don't know the time, the spacing, the movement, the redirect. But the tighter you can fire your feet, the better you're going to be. If he comes down the middle, the better you're going to be if you got to redirect. But if you get caught with a foot hanging, well, you're no good to anybody. You're going to you lose power, but then you lose lateral movement. So foot fire is absolutely huge. And if you can't fire, so that's something every coach should, I think, at every level should be working on. And posture, foot fire, and just constant, because there's so many things that don't. And Coach McNally talks about all the time about foot fire, because there's so many variables. If you got a guy that, if you're uncovered, let's say you're guard on the G bubble and you got a linebacker coming at you, you can't charge at him with long steps. Like everything has to be foot fire. Plus, if you're foot firing on the line and like duo or something or whatever, Coach sent a couple videos the other day, you can deal with the movement. You can also be powerful. So you got the best of all worlds when you foot fire.
When you foot fire, just before you strike, you get your feet rooted.
Yes.
You don't foot fire and then block the guy. You foot fire, then you gather and you root. The foot fire just takes you from point A to point B, whether it's forward, sideways, whatever. But when you strike, you better have your feet on the ground. Okay? There's one guy, and Scott knows him. In fact, Scott's even talked to him. Every block, pass or run, he foot fired. His name was David DeCastro. They're all pro. I don't think he had extraordinarily strength, but he was an excellent blocker.
Yes.
He fired his feet on every fucking block.
When you do walkthroughs, do you foot fire? Even in walkthroughs?
Yeah. I mean, I think this is for coaches that are in high school and stuff. I mean, one thing we're always kind of conscious of is that if you were in a walkthrough and you took if you took the remote and you're watching the film, and the walkthrough should look just like the live action game. It's just the difference is speed. That's it. It's like if you're in a walkthrough, you could fast forward and it should look exactly what you're doing in the game, because you don't have enough opportunities to work these techniques where you have a chance, where you can afford to send someone out there and take some lackadaisical steps. Foot fire, do all the same footwork. All the mechanics should match live competition that you're doing in the walkthrough. And I think if you kind of look at it in those terms, you're going to get more out of your walkthroughs. I mean, so you can use a walkthrough not just for a mental repetition, but you can, you're still supporting the techniques, which are hard to develop and really to groove with limited time. So absolutely, like, we'll get on people in the walkthroughs because they're filmed. It's like, hey, maybe you got the right guy here, but it's a terrible job because your posture was not there. This is not the footwork we want. So we're critical of that, and if you're critical of it, you're going to see the kids. They know they're being evaluated, and they're going to change their behavior as a result. So that's important, in my opinion.
You know what the other big mistake is, and I don't know how many coaches are watching this here.
We got 24 just on YouTube, and that's not counting any of the Twitter guys, Coach. We probably got 50.
All right, well,
maybe more.
Of 70 guys who are watching, all 70 have made this mistake. They have a guy hold a shield. Maybe they're standing on the board, and they have the blocker go out and hit the guy, and the guy on defense never comes forward.
Mm-hmm.
How many hours have we wasted with those kinds of fucking drills?
Mm-hmm.
All right, the guy you're blocking should come forward, slant in, slant out, make a move on you, whatever.
Yeah.
If it's only a half speed drill.
Yeah.
But don't just stand there on the board and let the guy block you and drive you down. Boards and bags. That's the word they use.
Mm-hmm.
All 70 of them watching out there have done it at one time.
Coach,
The biggest waste of hours, maybe days that we've all done in our coaching career.
It's a waste, and it's actually detrimental more than it is even a waste of time, because now you're practicing something that you're not seeing, so you're not getting any benefit. The one thing that you talked about stance and how we would go about a stance, same as we take time. I take time. I'm going to teach our guys how to hold a pad, because you'll see kids that they're out here with the hands up. That's like, it's not a surface that you can feel like you're getting a fit on. So, and then sometimes the pad hand shields are terrible. That's another story. We have a blast shield we made with tip of the spear.
Yeah, talk about that. Talk about the blast shield.
The blast shield is it's a simple shield. It's just Ray Crowther makes it. But what we've done is, because you look around, and again, no disrespect to other manufacturers, because they make some great stuff, but you're looking at these shields and you're like, okay, first of all, the shield's wider than the chest plate. So coaches are always saying keep tight hands. Well, actually, what you like to do is you should have your hands, actually, you would like to, because there's contours of the chest plate. So when you're looking at a defender, that's one of the issues I have with, I'm an advocate for year-round pads. I'm not saying year-round contact, but let players, like if I'm competing in jiu-jitsu, okay, in a tournament, I'm wearing a gi. If someone said, hey, you can't train with the gi, but you can train otherwise, and then we're going to throw you into a match a week before the damn tournament, and then you're like, oh, you're still not really good with your handles. You're not used to wearing the equipment. The football pads are not just a protection device. They're actually a weapon to be used against the man you're striking, right? So you want your hands to fit. So the blast shield helps trains that. So in other words, like, these things that you're using with the blast shield, it just puts the hands in a position that reflects the fit that you're going to get on a guy with tight hands. It allows you to strike, and there's a picture of it. But yeah, it's something that people would like, because there hasn't been. You can flip it on different sides, so you get all the different handles. You can use it for different strike combinations. You can use it pass, pro, and run blocking. But it's just, all it is designed to do is give guys a more realistic fit. To Coach's point, when you have guys that are lining up and doing drills, don't waste your time with nonsense. Make it reflect the act that you're trying to accomplish in the game. It should match that evenly.
Yeah, and you made a great point in one of the earlier videos I watched. It's almost like that jiu-jitsu mindset that you are going against another man, and that you have to practice that. And you said, even like, if you're in Virginia, we don't have really any rules other than you're not allowed to wear equipment out of season. But you said take the outer pad off, the hard shell, and just have that underneath thing like you pay $200 for. Basically, you're just going to be left with a cushion pad and block that. That was a great point.
Yeah, just like, again, there's just not a lot of time. So when you're training things that are not direct, then you're really, are you optimal? Are you benefiting as much? And I think so just simple things like that. In training the guys that hold the pad, we have a series of pad holding skills, that we teach. It's really. You want those guys, depending on the type of opponent you're playing, you should, what are you really gaining out of those drills? And And again, we talked about how coaches don't have enough time as it is. So why would you do anything that isn't specific to what you're facing in competition?
Yeah. Coach McNally always says that Coach Callahan is the best in the world. Why is he the best in the world? What is so great about Coach Callahan, Coach?
I said
Yeah,
Coach
you know,
Callahan and Coach Peters are the best in the world.
Yes, you did. You said both of them are the best in the world. But what is so great about Coach Callahan, Scott?
well, I'm going to tell you, you get Coach McNally, Coach Callahan. I'm just extremely fortunate to have them as mentors for me, because you're going, wow, the full package. I mean, they know everything, and they have and they're very well thought out. So the thing is, Coach Callahan is he's very smart, he's a brilliant person, and he's constantly tweaking and evolving, and there's no ego behind that. He's always looking for the best methods. From a schematic standpoint, the run game and the protection game, he's excellent. Just a great mentor for me, an opportunity, since Coach McNally's not coaching anymore, but I get to work with Bill, and man, we get just the way he is as a professional, his eye for there's not any holes in his game, in my opinion. He's the best in the game now because of what he brings from, he evaluates talent at a high level. He scouts and schemes at the highest level. He's got the best technique, in my mind, and his drills, his approach. There's just nothing that isn't, top level with Coach Callahan. So from my perspective, you're really, this is the guy to learn from right now, because for me, because I'm, I came in, Coach McNally and I have been working together for a lot of years, but we were in like a different realm. It was outside of, a building, and we're talking techniques. But now it's like Coach Callahan. I'm in the building. We got our offense, our system. We're always working. He's so excellent to work for as a mentor, but he's got a great, he's always looking for better methodology. So
he was a quarterback.
Yes. And that helps him too.
He was a quarterback that learned how to coach the offensive line.
So I got a real issue here. My battery is got a 4% left. So if would it be able to? Can I come in on my phone here or no?
I'm sure you could, if you want to keep going. I know Coach McNally.
It's up to you guys if you have
keep
more
talking.
To do.
Yeah, let's keep going if we can, or you can can you hook it up to a charger?
I don't have my charger here. It's in. I got it down the street, so I'm not able to get it.
Okay.
My fault. I thought I had this thing should have lasted.
I think before Coach Peters leaves, and he ought to be able to leave, is to ask him how many employees, because he coaches for the Browns, but he still owns, I believe, Tip of the Spear, say football. How many employees do you have, Coach, that work for you on your company?
We've got 4 guys that work with us, and we're small, but we try to make a larger impact. So Mike Pollock runs Tip of the Spear now. He operates it since I took the job with the Browns, and so we partnered there. And Mike's been with me since 2015. He retired. He played for the Bengals, so Coach knows him. Another Arizona State player, and Mike is excellent. And so Mike really is the kind of runs the show. And then Todd DeLamalier he's out in North Carolina. Todd is excellent. His dad's Joe D. Todd is Joe DeLamalier, the NFL Hall of Fame guard, played for the Browns. He's an excellent resource for us. He's awesome. He does a lot of the clinics out there too, and just outstanding. He's got a great understanding of, he's a exercise science guy. Does a lot of training, not just football specific, but he's great at all of that. So John Clanton's another guy we have. We have a few guys that we kind of bring in for camps and clinics, but one of the things we've learned is it's very hard to expand those kinds of guys, because we are all about quality, and we've tried to do that where you get a bunch of coaches and then you get a little bit of disruption. So we felt like we can keep our content and our information really sound if we do most of that through video, and then we obviously do our clinics too. So guys might go out, but we're limited by our abilities to deliver those clinics because of the lack of people that are involved. So we're small, but we hope we're making a big impact.
What I mean is that all those people listening ought to bring in some of Scott's people, because Scott actually, has another job with the Browns, but with his company, you ought to bring those people in, some of those people in, all you high school coaches out there or other college coaches, because Scott's got people that work for him that can coach all of Scott's stuff. And,
no question. Mike Pollock is going to some NFL teams. He's got some college programs he works with. And the one thing that I'd offer to anyone that's listening, if you go to our website, tipofthespearfootball.com, go on there. You can watch our stuff. You get a free month. Just sign up, get a free month, cancel if you don't like it. But if you like it, then you might have some questions, and that's when you could follow up, and maybe, Mike will come out and help you and in any areas that you have, so we get more scheme specific and help you implement these types of things. And also, try to correct a lot of the technique flaws that happen, because that's one of the things that we've noticed is guys have questions after they get dug into the content. And that's how we feel like you get more out of those clinics when you kind of look at the video content first and you get your hands in it. And we're always available for people to help with, because our goal is not just to let you watch it. We want you to, if you like it, implement it. And then if you don't like it, tell us what we could do better, because, at the end of the day, it's an evolution. We're trying to continually advance. So what might have been good information 10 years ago may still be good information, but maybe there's better. So it's always an evolution and trying to give the best resources to coaches, and then thereby giving the best information to their players.
Yes, sir. Anything, Scott, that you would like to say to the coaches that are watching or will watch, or Coach McNally, before we sign off?
I think hopefully they gained something from this. And if they didn't, fire off a question or two before we log out.
We might. Hey, Scott, do you think we'll make it to podcast number 2? That was our goal.
Yeah, assuming. Yeah, I'd love to. This has been fun, guys. There's a lot.
Is Coach Callahan aware of the Championship Football Coaches Clinic and Coach McNally being on the Championship Football Coaches Clinic?
He is aware. Yes, he's aware. I'm not sure if he's logged in
Coach
here,
McNally.
Yeah, he's going to tune in afterwards. Is this a live? Is this something people can watch after?
This is live, and it will be on YouTube. And Coach McNally, would you like to name drop the guy that I coached? He's my favorite player. Who's my favorite player I always talk about?
Oh, Morgan Moses. He ain't worth a shit either.
Hey, man, I'll take Mo any day of the week.
Coach, Morgan Moses, he's a good player. What do you mean?
He gives me a hard time, because I'm a high school coach and I got an NFL guy, and we're watching the Redskins, and I'm like, that's my guy, Morgan Moses. Look at Mo. Yeah.
Coach Callahan coached him for a number of years. He loves Morgan. Yeah.
Oh man, he's the best.
I'm just kidding, Troy.
He's giving me a hard time. Yeah.
Yep.
Coach, I love you, Coach McNally. And Scott, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. Hope everybody got something. We don't have any questions right now, so
Coach
McNally.
If there's any questions, like from anything I said, just go on Twitter. I got to do a little better. I don't spend a lot of time on there, but we're willing to answer questions if there's anything that comes up from here on Twitter, and just reach out and I'll do what I can to help.
Yeah, Robert says, thanks for everything, guys. Great job. Hope this is posted to your channel later so I can rewatch it. It's going on the Championship Football Coaches Clinic Twitter. It's on YouTube. I'll repost it. I'll tag Scott. I'll tag Coach McNally. Coach McNally, are you done for the day, or are you going to go back to Twitter and post some more?
I don't know. All I know
He's never done.
Now, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'll bet you Scott Peters is the only full-time NFL coach that's on your podcast that's speaking to people.
Mm-hmm.
This guy is employed full-time coach to the best offensive line in football.
Yes.
Then they're going to be a lot better once this quarterback gets geared up, Watson.
We got a lot of work to do before we can say that we're the best in football, Coach, but appreciate it.
But with the coaching and with some of the players they have, they are the most technically sound coached offensive line in the National Football League. I'm bragging on Scott a little bit because I don't think there's any other, because all the guys that you're listening to slapdicks like me. I'm almost 80 years old and I'm retired. Here you got a full-time young coach that's dealing day to day with the stars. I am dealing with fucking videos that I've had.
You're dealing with me, Coach.
And I'm older than two guys put together.
Well, the thing is, Coach, as you know, Coach, the Cool Clinic, all the stuff you're doing, you better believe this. I may be the only one that's talking right now, but when I was at the combine, you know how many people are on Twitter that aren't actively posting on there that are looking at your stuff? Many.
Are you kidding me?
Not at all.
So,
Coach McNally, people watch you, they follow you, and they're not inclined to wreck anything, but they are, trust me, studying.
I told you,
everything.
Coach. I told you people were going to find out. They're talking about you at the combine, Coach. They're at the NFL meetings with the owners and the GMs and the head coaches, and they're talking about Coach McNally.
No question.
All I want them to do is somebody take our Navy SEAL from Buffalo.
There you go.
Yes.
Would you work for a year for free if someone takes the Navy SEAL as a consultant?
I'd work for free at home.
No.
I wouldn't work for free.
No, no. You know why? Because that you pay this man, because this is a trillion. I don't know how many billions of dollars are in this business, but this guy brings so much value. So you pay
the
him.
Redskins just got sold for how much? Man,
Who knows? But you're making the best guys in the world better. Coach McNally's worth every penny.
Man, Coach, you're the best. Steven says, "Thank you, coaches, for the podcast. Appreciate it." So, Scott, thank you for coming on.
We got to
thank you, Troy.
We got to thank
Troy. Thank you, sir. It was fun, and look forward to doing it again. Appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, I'll talk to y'all later.
All right, see you guys.
Thank you to our sponsors, Rat Coach, the Top Hopper, and my guys at the Sports Workbook. You can use the code Top Hop to save money at the Top Hopper. It's going to be at the NFL Combine next year. All right, they're taking away the Vertec machine. They're going to use the Top Hopper. Coach McNally, what did you think about that with Coach Scott Peters? Do you think people got their money's worth?
I think the people understand how smart he is too, but the way he handles himself and the way he uses words and sentences and like I say, I think everybody can kind of understand how he is the best.
He is the best.
His pass protection skills, because he obviously is not going to give out all his secrets because he's employed, and he doesn't want executive from the company he works for to get pissed off at him. So he's going to be a little more general with his answers and give out all the secrets, which I don't blame him because he's getting paid by a professional football team. So just be damn lucky that you got him on there he spent an hour and 45 minutes talking to the guys.
Yeah, talking to me, a high school coach in Richmond, Virginia. That's unbelievable, Coach.
Yeah. You got a good one now. Yeah.
Because of you, Coach. So we're going to sign off. Coach McNally will be back on Twitter maybe tonight. He'll definitely be up early tomorrow morning posting stuff. Coach McNally, how does it make you feel that they're talking about you being on Twitter at the Combine?
I don't know how it makes me feel because I haven't made a fucking penny out of it.
You haven't made a penny.
I've given out $1 million worth of information and I haven't got one penny.
And we have me and you both, Coach. We haven't made one penny.
You're right. I mean, you're doing all this for free. You must be crazy. But anyway.
But Coach, if I wasn't doing it, would I be talking to you and to Scott Peters?
No, you would not.
Yeah, I wouldn't even be in the same. I wouldn't even be able to get to Scott Peters.
Somebody's got to hire you and get you a better job in college.
I love
somewhere.
Well, Coach, I love where I'm at, and I appreciate everything.
Some college coach out there needs a recruiter, needs a defensive line coach, needs an offensive line coach, needs a quality control coach. I'm talking about in college football. There's some college coach out there that says, "Hey, we ought to hire this guy. He's a hell of a recruiter." Okay, I'm not saying to leave your high school because it's a good school. I'm just saying to you, why you're not in college football as one of the assistant coaches, I got no idea.
So you think that in the future that I have the ability to coach at the highest level?
You're single, you can move, and I don't think.
Well, I got my girlfriend, Coach. Don't forget about my girlfriend now.
Yeah, I know you got a girlfriend.
So I'm not married. Is what you mean?
You can visit her or drop her and get a new one. But my point is, There's got to be some college coach out there that can go to the boss and say, hey, listen, for this new job that we got coming up, let's get this Troy Taylor. Because if you can do what you're doing on these podcasts, you can recruit. Because all recruiting now is college is all this portal bullshit. So all you got to be able to do is have a little bullshit and look at video, and I don't even know how they do it. They all these kids put their name in the portal, then you look at all their highlight films, and then you try to entice the kid to come to your school because you tell him he can play right now and he might be the second string linebacker at Nebraska, so he ends up being the first string linebacker at Northern Illinois, or whatever all that stuff is. So
yeah, coach.
But you can do you can do that. You can recruit. I know that.
Yes, sir. All right, I'm going to press end, coach. You stay on here so we can talk.
All right.
Okay. Thank y'all for tuning in.